Good morning again, coffee chat friend. A few little words through this talking head about a topic that, well, probably two topics really that have been probably more taboo than any other topics in history throughout different cultures. And so much so that we even experienced a little bit of a taboo at coffee chat. Most people didn't want to talk about this topic, one of them anyways. The topic this morning is to do with sex and death. Now, the first part of that topic, the sex part, was suggested to be a live coffee chat at one time. Well, when I say live, the chatting about it, that is. And most people were uncomfortable with it, which is telling, and it goes along with what the great Indian guru Osho Rajneesh once pointed out, that sex and death are traditionally the most prohibited topics of cultural societies throughout history. And it's interesting, maybe understandable in many ways, but interesting to note that through the Sex Act, life as we know it, as individualized life, begins. People would argue with that, but we know rational argument for sure as to whether that happens at that point. A lot of people consider when we take our first breath to be it, but we know scientifically that it begins earlier than that, and we know that it begins with the Sex Act, really, or shortly thereafter. As a result of, let's put it that way, as a result of sexual intercourse. The Death Act as well, or the lack of act, I guess, is also something that's been taboo. At least it's been, and both of these have been taboo in terms of BS stories. And a lot of it maybe had to do with, the safety, the protection of children, the, people's sentimentalities, and also lack of understanding, lack of any sort of scientific knowledge in the past, or a lot of scientific knowledge in the past, so people rely more on superstition as to what actually happens, some stories of storks and whatnot to protect the innocent in the beginning, and then there was all kinds of superstitious stories as to where souls go and what have you at the end of it all. Whereas, and maybe it's, but not a whole lot of talk about it. But let's talk about it, because, if it's, death is inevitable, death as we know it, as far as we can understand anyway, as far as been the experience of humanity. So it's an important thing to consider, because if we can find a way that inevitabilities can improve the quality of our life experience, then why not talk about it, right? And then, of course, the sex thing, the whole sex topic, the whole sex involvement, it doesn't take a stretch to realize how that can improve the quality of our life experience. And of course, maybe that's one of the reasons why the topic has been historically taboo, because maybe it could compete with heaven in a way, in some ways, and that would be a terrible thing, because for controlling entities and controlling groups, because you want to make sure that our superstitious beliefs are adhered to, because that is your ticket to heaven. And of course that's not here. All this sort of let's say non-factual based or no evidence based belief systems. It's amazing how they are a huge distraction to what we know for sure is happening, and what we know for sure that we can involve ourselves in. So, just thought it was interesting. I don't think we ever talked about death either at Coffee Chat. And I'm not going to get into much of a talk here at all on these topics. I'm just putting out the idea to talk about these things. I was at a relative's place recently, and they have young kids, and they're of the mind that it's better that we do talk about this thing among the family, especially the sex thing, because kids find out about it anyway, and there's no stopping them in terms of their urges and whatnot. So why not talk about it? Why put it in a bottle? Why hide it away? And those are good questions. Now, another point that I would say is that the whole sex thing is really very much related to what we talked about yesterday, the use and abuse. It's pretty easy to see the dysfunction that can come because of sex addictions and sex abuse, sexual abuse, all these sorts of things that are abuses, versus the wonder and the beauty and the joyful consequences of the use. The use. And when I'm saying use, I'm talking about what we normally think of as the rightful use, consenting, where there's consent, where there's love, where there are blessings called children involved, or as a result rather, not involved, that's a terrible word to use, term to use, that's a slip. The consequences are the children and family, right? So, and death, going on to the one about death, well, once again, it's one of those things that's inevitable. It's something we're all going to experience. And therefore, it's not surprising that there's songs and poetry and writings and whatnot about living like we are dying. So it's kind of like it sounds like a kind of a consequence, dichotomy. How can we live as though we are dying? Well, I'm guessing the point is that, in dying, we let go, because there's nothing that we can hang on to that's tangible here, that's has any meaning to us anymore. Once we're on that road of certainty we all are, but once it's imminent. So, and also we can then really live in the moment too, if we think about it. So if we can learn how to do that and realize that that's what we're doing anyway, that's the inevitability, then we won't take things, every detail, so seriously, and we'll be able to probably see the finer points of life as being so important. I forget the name of the book. There was some sort of Marcus Aurelius, I think was the name of the guy. He was some sort of a Roman leader, and he wrote this little book of memos or meditations or whatever it was. And he talks about in there at one point about how, if you're given a couple of days to live, how we live. Well, and it would be different than we typically live. And he makes the point that every day is like that. We only have a few days to live in the big scheme of things, and therefore, why don't we live like we're dying? Why don't we truly do the things in the moment that are so important, that that are significant to our heart, if you will. There was also another book written by a nurse named Bronnie Ware. She was a nurse. I forget the name of the term, but it's the care that's given to people who are almost dying anyway. I forget, there's an actual term for it. And she worked as that type of nurse for about 25 years. Her book was called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And, well, the title is telling. People always have regrets when they're about to die, because they feel they didn't truly live. And so it's interesting though that in the process of dying, they realized how to truly live. So if we reflect on that, reflect on, if I only had today, if I only had this week, what would I say to people? What would I say to the people I love? What would I do? What would really matter to me? You know? And my brother passed away a few years back, and in his final months and whatever, he was a changed man. I mean, things that were, I remember one time I was talking to him about geopolitics or world finance or whatever, and at one point he said to me, he says, does that really matter? He asked me, does that really matter? To him it didn't matter anymore. What was more important was, you know, watching his young son go skating and talking about his, you know, something that his daughter was involved with or his wife was involved with or whatever. It was the tangible, more real life, immediate real life that was elevated in importance to a great degree. So that, you know, and I could see that he lived on a different level in those days. It's too bad most of us have to get to that point to actually begin to live. It's really odd, isn't it? But it's something to talk about. In conclusion, that I would say that, you know, it's important that we talk about these sort of things, I think, if we're going to have a meaningful conversation with ourselves and with others and with people that are important to us, that we talk about topics that are important, that do affect our lives and do have great consequences on our lives. But like the old song goes, you know, let's talk about sex, baby. It's important. It's important to consider those conversations within ourselves. It's important to have those conversations with people we love, people who are important to us, and we spend a lot of time with, who are involved in our lives a lot. And likewise, the whole topic about death. You know, it's part of the cycle of life. You think about it, and if we just talk about the everyday living and going to work and all that sort of stuff, that's kind of like there's kind of like three aspects of life. There's like the Hindus, they had like the three gods. They had the god of creation, the god of maintenance, and the god of the destruction, right? So that cycle of life, if we think about it, that we all go through, the creative side, when we get created individually, we come to be, and then we live out this life, and then we cease individually, as far as we know, or at least the physical, mental aspect of it it goes back to, just the raw materials, I guess. After that, everybody's got a different story as to what happens. But I mean, we know that quality of life is affected in a use versus abuse. On that spectrum, the quality of life is definitely affected through the whole sex topic and the whole sex activity, greatly enhanced or not the quality of life. And death, well, the ability to talk about it and the comfort level and the acceptance of that reality and the being able to live as though we are dying, because we are dying. And if that helps us to see what's important for us to do so that we can live a more fulfilled life by realizing how precious every moment is and how precious every experience is. All kinds of things can blossom from that. I remember, as an example, without belaboring this much longer, my brother, how he became so much more of a grateful man. He became grateful for the air that he had. He became grateful for the time that he did have. How precious it was. Why do we have to wait for the knock of cancer, for the stranger at the door, if you will? Why do we have to wait for that? Because surely that's coming anyway. Why can't we realize that it is coming? And the time in this incarnation, if we call it, is limited. We can see it all around us. People passing away every day. Just wanted to share these thoughts, and hopefully they are important. Hopefully they get a conversation going that is fruitful and helpful. And two topics really, sex and death. I think they're important. They have been taboos, and they don't have to be anymore. Hope you enjoyed. I'll talk to you later. My name is Steve. Bye-bye for now.